Great. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Winkel. I am the Clinical Director of the Canadian International Institute of Art Therapy, and we're excited to present today. I'm here with Cheryl Ann Webster.
Hi, I'm the Managing Director of CIAT and excited about the whole symposium because we are very passionate about our live online system.
And it's been wonderful to meet Kate. I read your articles 20 years ago. I've been sort of a traditional instructor of art therapy for decades, starting in Los Angeles at Loyola Marymount, my alma mater, and then moving my way up the West Coast to Victoria, BC, where we are now. And we're going to share a bit about the way we work with students in the online environment.
And I think that's the key to it, as we've heard from other presenters, is we all came from a background of in-person. We're all familiar with, as a client or as a therapist, working with our people within physicality. And so shifting from that, I mean, Michelle, here you're showing this beautiful image of your most recent training. So we still do in-person training along with the live online.
Yes, I just got back from a month in Egypt with our executive director, and we really enjoy that face-to-face component. But one of the challenges is that after spending a month with them and developing relationship and really building their capacity, we want to be able to continue that. So one of our dilemmas was, how do we make online education part of a viable art therapy training? And we feel like we've been successful, and we're going to share some of those discoveries today. So we are, as I mentioned, sitting here in Victoria, BC. However, we have students from around the world. We have a campus called IPAT in Bangkok, where we go 3 times yearly and do face-to-face training, and also in Tokyo, Japan. We also are registered with the Ministry of Advanced Education here in our province, as well as via the Canadian Art Therapy Association.
And when we realized that not only could we not continue our studies when we left the communities or the other programs that we were running around the world, but also to really build on the online presence, we had a lot of questions, and some of them have been mentioned really in the previous presentations, about confidentiality, about really making it as close to an in-person experience as possible, the availability of materials and as well as software, and making it easier for the client or student. And as Kate talked about, you know, computers used to sort of be out of range, and now, well, they're in our hands on our phones. And without using too much software, how could we integrate that? So what we decided to use to really bridge that distance is we chose Zoom as a platform, as a video conferencing platform with a lot of its plugins, which meant our students didn't have to install software. They could just click of a button, it would be there, and they didn't have to leave that application to utilize a drawing tool or anything. That we found ways to bring that right to the platform. We could record the sessions for teaching purposes, but we could keep those recordings safe and secure because we can record locally, which meant the confidentiality between what was shared on the screen. And we have guidelines set up for our students of how to prepare their space.
Yeah, preparing their space is really critical, because when we think about the studio environment, we need a confidential, safe, inviting space where the materials can just kind of go everywhere. And so we've really experimented with how to help our students create that for themselves in their home environment. So some of our students in Asia, for example, live in very small spaces, and they may share it with their family members. So we've brainstormed with them and created tutorials on how do you do that? How do you know that class is going to be for 4 hours on this particular day? How are they going to get to claim that space for that particular time so they can get the full amount out of their class, which is experiential. They're going to be making art in their own studio. So I actually think Sarah was describing, there was that photo of the couch, and when we have, there are vast benefits to clients of art therapy and students of art therapy being in their own environment, because there's a way in which they feel more natural and willing to try out new media.
Exactly. And because we wanted to make sure that whether it's when our students are working with clients, or we're working with clients or supervisees, or whether we're teaching, we wanted to make sure as many of the safety nets, confidentiality that we have in person could be there. So we utilize the cameras a lot, and we'll show you a little bit more about how we utilize the cameras. But having 1 to 2 cameras in the hub, in the actual classroom, and then having students learn how to use their own cameras. We also use a learning management system called Moodle. So artwork isn't being emailed to and from instructors. Instead, it's being put up onto the learning platform where there's a live forum, where there's all the policies and the codes of ethics, where the class is outlined, where their Zoom invites are. And it's that central place, almost like when you used to go to school and you'd pass your homework through the glass window and the lovely secretary would take it and stamp to say they received it and then pass you the next one. It's a little bit along those lines. So one of our key things was not burdening our students or our clients with too much technology needs or knowledge. So we provide a lot of video tutorials on how to, specifically for the setting that we use. They're probably eager to see a little bit of some of the artwork that we use. One of the key things I remember you saying to me, Michelle, is I can see how we can teach a number of our classes online, especially we call it live online because it is on camera in real time. But one of your biggest concerns was, how do we teach group art therapy online?
Yes, and I was quite hesitant, to be fair. And I'm going to give a little case study here about what that was like. I've taught group art therapy in many countries with many groups, face to face, and there's a real power in coming together, feeling the material together, standing beside each other. Some of those psychodynamics I just didn't think could be recreated in the online environment, and I was quite thrilled to see that that really was possible. So let's take you through some of my learning. So of course there's the shared whiteboard, and I was at the level or even below some of my students in the technology, in learning how to manipulate the mouse pad and how to play around with the color, the opacity, the texting, the text capacity. But what happened was that we all became kind of at the same level, and the playfulness and lightness that came out became a real benefit. So the shared whiteboard became a weekly ritual just for check-in. So we would do 5 to 10 minutes at the most about the weekly check-in and invite people to title their work. And the first day, 1 or 2 of the students needed a bit of help with the annotation and how to get the Zoom functionality, but we always have a tech support person in each of our classes, and there's a maximum of 12 students. We find 9 to be kind of the perfect size, and we all get to experiment. So the next slide you'll see.
Oh, sorry, can I just go back one tiny bit? So just in case you missed it, of course, we're on camera just like we are here, and the students have gathered. They've got their own art materials. And what Michelle's talking about with the whiteboard, if you're not familiar with it, because a lot of Zoom users even don't use it.
Oh, that's true.
And it does have to be under the professional plan, but the whiteboard is this wonderful way, just sharing a screen like we are here, but with a few clicks of the mouse, you can then draw on it at the same time. Yes. So although only one of us can share a screen right now, and if Sarah was to share a screen, it would switch ours off. But when it comes to annotating the whiteboard, we can all draw at the same time in the same space. And so that's what enabled us to really collaborate on an art piece, even before it became a ritual, just playing, just testing it out to see what does happen. Because, well, as you see now, when you're sharing a screen, this shared screen becomes the big part and the video the small part. So I could see Michelle and the other students moving their mouse to draw, yes, but we couldn't always see what they were drawing.
Or we couldn't see what they were then planning to draw. And so there was a lot of playfulness that developed where I might say, oh, who drew that tree? And then somebody else might say, oh, I'm going to add a flower to your leaf. And so the verbal communication actually increased a bit.
It really did. And I think we'll share a bit more of that as we go through with these unwritten rules that started to happen. But Michelle does like to test the technology and push it to its limits. So once we mastered the whiteboard, you then wanted it further.
I then, of course, I still missed the textured sensory-based materials that we all love in art therapy. So the following week, we found a bird's nest, and I thought, oh, how am I going to adapt this to a group art therapy activity? So you cleverly decided, well, let's take some beautiful photos of this nest. And I actually showed the nest to the class so they could get a sense that I was feeling it, and they could, I think,
hear it.
Yes, the crunch crunch. There were no eggs in the nest. So we uploaded the photo to the Zoom platform and invited each of the students live at the same time to make an egg to place into the nest. So it became an overlay of the photo, and we had the tactile actual nest with us to model to them, and then for them to decorate their eggs. We did feel like we were all together in the same room.
And we have to say we were surprised too that not only could we take the whiteboard tools but adapt them to then draw and annotate straight onto our own image. So the whiteboard became our backdrop that we could then draw on, and ultimately save these so we could share them on the forum, on our Moodle platform, so students could then dialogue about them and then create responsive artwork about them as well.
And we keep the same ethical guidelines around confidentiality, in that, for example, when we uploaded these to the Moodle platform, it was only accessible by the students enrolled in that class. So their art was as honored as it would be if we were all in the same studio together.
And before we go on to tell you some of the unwritten rules that happened around the whiteboarding, there was a really interesting part that we wanted to use found objects, and we had them here in the main classroom. But how are we going to make sure that students could see all the found objects and have their own found objects to discuss with, and then bring them together as a group piece? And so utilizing 2 cameras, and you tell us about how the students felt about the found objects.
Well, that was such a fun day, actually, because I felt a little bit nervous. I didn't really know quite how I was going to do it, because when I do assemblage or found objects in the studio with students, we are dealing with a pile of objects on the table in front of everyone, and then they're invited to select their objects and build their sculpture. So, or the many variations of that. So what we did with this one was we had the overview camera and the face-to-face camera, and a beautiful array of objects in front of me on the black velvet. And I panned it with enough time to give every student a chance to decide which objects they were attracted to. So I invited them to tell me which objects they wanted. I would pick it up, and then I created an empty place where we were going to create a group sculpture with me as the facilitator. So they would guide me in where to place things. And what really struck me was how specific they were and how they knew whether I had placed the object in the right place or not. So for example, we started, I believe, with the conch shell, one of the students, and then we next moved to the cork. And then when it was time to place the broken glasses, the student was very specific about wanting it in a certain way. And so we see that with the artwork when we're face-to-face. There's a sense of what feels right about the shape and look of a piece based on their own unconscious desires and the way that they're interacting with each other. But that did manifest as well in this platform, and the students found it really powerful. So we spent quite a bit of time sort of maneuvering the objects and having each person weigh in on how it looked as a piece. It became very much a collective piece, and I was just literally a facilitator. I did not have any intention on where objects should be, and they directed me. And some of the group members were able to practice speaking up more in a way that they might not in a group that was face-to-face. So that was a learning for them.
And the interesting, I think, part there you've really picked up on is the students reported they could feel the objects in their fingers. And I think it's that need for visual. We could see their response, we could see the change in their skin if they were excited, we could see breathing, we could see body movements, and they could see the objects so clearly with the 2 cameras. Now, when we do this with clients, of course, clients only need their own camera. They've often tipped them down to show their artwork as they're creating it, but as the hub, we have the opportunity to have multiple cameras, and it really does add to that sensory. So then we went back to the whiteboard, as you said, as a ritual. Mm-hmm. And that's when we discovered a lot of unwritten rules started to show up, and it was quite fascinating.
Mm. So, for example, since I didn't know who was drawing the orange line, they might have been drawing over another student's line. And when that's done in a traditional setting, that can be seen as encroaching or intrusive. But on the whiteboard platform, it tended to become more playful, and the students would laugh and talk with each other about what was happening with the lines. And they really, it has a different sensibility.
And you knew where the edges were, but you really didn't know how thick. Like if you imagine it all as paint, we would have been quite messy, and I'd have probably pounded over Michelle's hands and all kinds of things if this was to be reproduced in a traditional setting. But our students still do then go out and explore for themselves and do their practicing and do their own artwork. But the Moodle platform and Zoom allows us to upload and then share their images as well.
So, for example, this was a homework assignment where they were to go and do a found object nature-based piece where they had to find several objects that they were very attracted to and at least one that they did not like at all, and combine it into a piece. And this student all of our students have given permission for all of these to be viewed here. And so then what happens is the student takes a photo of their work, uploads it to the Moodle safe and secure platform, and gets to see all their colleagues' artwork together. And then we make sure to check in about it and process the artwork in class the following week.
And one of the things you pointed out at the time was, if we were running this class in person, well, then everybody would have been in this environment. And when we went outside to do this particular activity, we would have been in the same locale, perhaps within 100 yards, finding similar objects and similar backgrounds. Mm-hmm. But in reality, the online platform meant that we had people as far north as Baffin Island. We had people in Egypt, Thailand,
the UAE. We had a student in Taiwan. And so their nature sculptures depicted where they were. So it was fun to see cacti or pieces of concrete, or here we've got the cactus of Portland, and then you'll see in the next slide a west coast, much more west coast. I think that was up here near Victoria, and then we go as far east as Newfoundland. One of our students doing a driftwood sculpture here, and so there's the sort of cultural learnings that happen really enrich the strength of the class. You know, when I think about my face-to-face class in Japan, it's fairly homogeneous. There is a beauty in that homogeneity, and a sharing that happens that's precious. And yet with our online students, they have a cultural humility just in the presence in which they're joining the class at whatever hour the time zone is that they come. We have students in Mongolia who are joining us at midnight for 3 hours. Yeah. And so their commitment to the program is pretty impressive. So there's a richness that develops, I believe, from that multicultural student body that we wouldn't get otherwise. We also really acknowledge wanting to recognize the economics of the situation. So because we're actually a nonprofit society that honors the economies, and we offer scholarships to several of our students around the world that are in places where they could not pay a North American price tag. So it allows us to be able to offer that. So we have students from Egypt, from Mongolia India, that are not paying much of a fee, and yet able to enrich the rest of the class and their experience as well, and learn and build capacity in their own community.
And the same with practicums in that sense, because we can't, as a small society, we wouldn't be able to afford, if we were doing everything in person, to fly somebody. And we live on an island here, on Vancouver Island. And so it's not just the economy of the student or the client, but it's also of our society in general, and the Prue Foundation and CIAT as a society. We need to make that so that we can support people. And the way to do it, and we've found it very successful, is to keep it online, and so long as it's visual.
Yeah, the visual is the priority. The art is the priority. We do a lot of homework with traditional media. I'm just going to share a few more of the screens because they're fun. But we actually see the group dynamics evolve in the same way that I do in face-to-face environments. I see somebody taking up more of the space. I see someone taking a leadership role that they didn't necessarily intend. I see the connections developing week after week to a deeper degree for them really sharing what's going on for them.
And the feelings that came out as well. You had asked as a check-in, how are we doing today? And this same flat, lacking texture media still was able to allow me to say I'm happy or not happy, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and there are ways in which I miss the traditional media. For example, this was actually a fascinating activity. We did a very traditional group therapy activity. This is the desert island. What happens, everyone, when you're on an island together? What are the things that you need? And in face-to-face groups, they build and paint and design this group together. So I tried the activity with my students, and it was quite successful. They were very playful and but also serious, discussing whether they needed a hospital, whether they needed security, whether they needed boats, how they were going to feed themselves. So those discussions were very similar to what they are face-to-face, and they designed their island together. I was not involved. I was observing the whole time. And so this very traditional activity was a success. I don't believe, I think the final product may be a little bit less aesthetically beautiful than the three-dimensional ones that I have. Certainly, my students in Bangkok are building some pretty amazing crumpled paper, wonderful, yummy three-dimensional pieces, but the process was very similar, and the connectivity and the learning, I think, was equally rich, if not richer, here in the class.
And arguably more environmentally friendly. We didn't throw away any materials. And for those therapists out there that are observing, storing this piece is a lot easier than storing a three-dimensional 6-foot table piece.
And again, just more importantly, which is the work Kate started over 20 years ago, it's access. So we've got students in Baffin Island who would not have the opportunity to take classes if it weren't for this. And yeah, students in rural and remote places, as long as they have internet capacity, they're able to join in.
And it doesn't take away from the in-person. As you can see, Michelle and Lucille have just got back from Egypt and Israel, and then Lucille's in Thailand and India in the next month. It doesn't take away from that, but it does allow it when they do leave the community, then they can pick up straight after that. Using all the social media that we have, we utilize every platform, because some platforms are banned in some areas, but we use all the basic social media, Facebook, closed groups, open group, public groups, and then more importantly, we really utilize a live web chat. And so all the faculty have access to answer questions on the live chat. And then because we are so in love with cameras, using our YouTube and our film studio to produce tutorials, living textbooks, so that the textbook for art therapy may not be always available to those in different countries, but we can send them a link to a video we've created with our senior faculty delivering the material through the video and through the screen, and our learning platform Moodle. And of course, we're lucky to have Google G Suites, which enables our students to have this intranet where they have this sense of safety and security with their materials that they're learning.
And I've been back less than a week from Egypt, but I'm I'm already using social media to keep in touch with my students as they practice the directives that they learned and the art therapy activities that they learned. So it's a way to keep that relationship going, which is what we're all about, is that relationship piece. And how can we keep art therapy alive and really engaging for students and for their clients.
Absolutely. And although, as you can tell with our passion, we could talk about this for hours, we are running out of time. So we want to really wrap it up with the whole concept of our goal was to take what we do in person to the camera, to the screen, to the internet, so that it was accessible. It was be able to be global in this global community we live in without losing the most important qualities of art therapy and therapy practices. And we feel at this point we're doing a really good job at that. And obviously we will continue to strive for improvement. And the only reason we know we're doing a really good job is because our students and our clients are letting us know that, and being able to provide services where they wouldn't otherwise be able to be received.
It's been exciting. So we invite questions. I think those are going to come through from Sarah.
Yes. So we will give you a minute to catch up, because we know, of course, that, oh, we've got you there, Sarah.
Hi, I just wanted to share some questions here. The first one is, thanks for sharing some of the functions of Zoom. Could we do this in an iPad app for Zoom? I'm wondering if we could use more sensitive styluses, example, Apple Pencil, to draw.
Yes, so you can use a Wacom tablet, drawing pad. You can use any of the tablets. You can even use your phone and your finger so that you've got that closer contact with it, and they work on every application, whether it's Android or Apple products, mobile or desktop.
Great. Then we just have a comment. Love this adaptation of the bird's nest. So creative and collaborative.
Thank you. It was really fun. It felt like a joint discovery.
Great. And then we are experimenting with the idea of using Zoom to connect homebound older adults, some with dementia in early stages. How easy to access is the Whiteboard feature in the overall interface?
It's really easy. I'm not very technical, and I think what really helps is having a tech support person just for that first time. So with patients with dementia, for example, if they could have, you know, a younger person handy to just show them the first time how they might access that, it's very easy.
And once you've set it up, most of the time, there's really only one button that throws people. There's a little button that says annotate, and one that says mouse. And if you accidentally click the one that says mouse while you're drawing, it stops the annotate. So that's normally where people get stuck. But for our students, they don't need all the tech support because we are the tech support. So I just say, share your screen, show me what it is. We send video tutorials and screen captures to show them. So I would say with a group that has any hesitation around technology, so long as there's somebody there to get it set up, then there won't be a problem. And well, I shouldn't say there won't be a problem. There's always a problem. Even this beautiful symposium, I'm sure you've had glitches over the 24 hours, but you just have to embrace them, just like somebody being late finding the classroom.
But if, for example, if the art therapist who was engaging with the patient with dementia had a bit of a comfort, they could do a few trial runs, for example, with a friend, and then they get used to it. Then they can help instruct the client with how to get that annotate button to pop up. So it's very doable.
It's much simpler than many of the other platforms. And talking of technical glitches, Sarah, we've lost you. So maybe Philly can come on?
Yeah, I'll try to bring her back. I'll contact her. By the way, I don't know, you mentioned some glitches in 24-hour symposium. I don't know what you're talking about.
I shouldn't say. Of course, there's never any glitches, but
I totally agree to your point on basically guiding people who are not technically inclined towards that first step to adopting a technology. That's something we find that it was very helpful. Even we have some studies that include virtual reality in art therapy, and we found that first 5 minutes of just introducing the technology is a make or break moment for them. it's either an amazing trip or a nauseating trip based on that first few minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when we think of it in terms of traditional art therapy, hey, welcome back, Sarah. In terms of traditional art therapy, it's no different than a client coming in and being intimidated by the materials around and maybe using an art material they haven't used before and it not quite moving or being the same tactile that they were expecting. So if you think of it in terms of that, then the comfort with technology can be very similar. It's just one small step, and now more and more of us, I think even, I can't think of anybody right now in my wider circle, family, friends, or within the art therapy world that doesn't at least have a smartphone. So we're already getting to the point where it's second nature. Augmented reality and virtual reality is already here.
Yeah. It's also like that 5-minute technical sorting out is about building relationship too. So if the art therapist is feeling comfortable with the technology or even shows their nervousness about it, that's a way to build rapport with the client. And so I think it's just as long as they know enough to make it be successful and they have a backup plan. So if this computer, the Zoom is working, but the audio is broken, that they might have a second laptop in their house where they can then do that with the client so that at least on their end, they feel, like they have a backup plan.
And at the end of the day, let's face it, normally if you switch it off and switch it on again, it's all good. Welcome back, Sarah. I think that's our time.
Yeah. I think that was it for questions, right? Sorry, I cut out there for a bit.
Okay, great. It was perfect timing. We were just talking about technical issues.
Okay, yeah, great. Well, we're back on here, and then I think if you're finished, then we'll pass it over to Andrea, if that's okay? Okay, thank you so much.